part of a generation of tools. It's really built to make cybersecurity easier. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the MSP Cyber Roundtable. I've got Scott Wright here today, and we are talking about AI. And that's a little unusual for us because I was not an early adopter of AI personally. In fact, I've been a little bit of a downer. We do use AI inside Fort Mesa, but I'm a big believer in the hype cycle. There's the Gartner hype cycle. There's the Dunning-Kruger model. If you want to look at the source of that psychology, and I think we're at a little bit of a tipping point in the current year. So I'm excited to get into that conversation a little later with Scott. In how are we taking this theoretical thing that is AI and actually turning it into real productivity? That's not theoretical. It's not like blue skies. Imaginary of like what's going to happen in the future, but we're literally receiving the gains today. So that's what today's about. And before we jump into that, though, Scott, you've been on the show before, but it's been a while. So welcome back.
It was almost a year. Yeah, thanks very much, Matthew. It's great to be back.
Yeah. So for anyone that doesn't know Scott's in the awareness business. He's in the cyber awareness business. And, I think I want to talk a little bit about ClickArmor, but before we talk about what you're doing right now, I think what I love to get into is the story of how you arrived at ClickArmor. Who were you before you put on your armor, I guess?
Yeah, well, going way back, you can see if you're watching the video, I don't have a lot of hair left, but I've been around for quite a while. I was actually an engineer by training, worked in high-tech product management for a while, and then got to do some consulting for the federal government on large IT systems. And that was really interesting. Risk assessments, security architectures, security policies. And that was in early 2000s, I guess, and came to realize that the technology was really good and improving, but the attackers are going to realize, hey, it's easier to go after the people and find vulnerabilities and go around the technology. And that's when I started doing security training, not just awareness, but I was teaching government managers how to do development securely or how to manage programs securely, things like that.
Yeah. So when was that? That was
2008, 2009.
Okay.
15, 20 years almost.
Yeah. So, I think that's really when the awareness game was starting to heat up. It wasn't quite, there was not a whole lot of products out there at that time.
There were not.
And even the theory was a little blurry. And, not well defined by the industry. But at that time, we did see, Mitnick was old news at that point.
Yeah, right? Fun story is I was, he was in jail. He'd been in jail from 98 to 2003, 2001 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he got out of jail, he was at the RSA show, the only RSA show I've ever gone to. And I was on a boat cruise where he was the featured speaker. And he told a story about how he kind of social engineered Bruce Schneier, which was fun.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
So anyway, yeah, that was Mitnick was around. He certainly was the marketing figurehead for Nova for many years. Around 2010, yeah. So around the time I was starting to get into this training thing.
So we had people like Mitnick out there talking about this thing, but we didn't really have a security industry response at that time.
No, it was all FUD. It was all FUD, really.
Yeah. So you were trying some stuff out, and okay, back into your story. You
Yeah.
were creating materials.
Yeah, I was doing lunch and learns, and I got contracts to do live training and custom training programs, little lightweight learning management system or app that you could just drop in, PHP app, that you could teach an enterprise without you could bypass the learning and development team, which was kind of fun. If you know enterprises, they like to control all the training, but the IT team basically just said, we need these people to know this stuff, we're putting it in. And so I did quite a bit of training for different organizations, public and private sector, back in the 2010, 2012 timeframe. And that was when KnowBe4 was just starting. And in fact, I had contracted somebody to help me do instructional design to create a nice online training program. And I also had a guy who was helping me with some innovative apps. I had one called the Honey Stick project, where I would drop a USB drives. That's a whole other story, but dropping USB drives is a fun project just to see what people do with them. And I got some publicity out of that. But one of my contractor guys said, hey, you know what? I could design a system where you could send out emails to people and track who opens them. And you could test whether people are opening phishing messages. I said, you know what? I love the idea. It's a great way to measure people's risk decisions. But unfortunately, I don't think it's that ethical, because you're sending out emails to people, and if they're not expecting them, then you could get backlash and all this stuff. Well, guess who went ahead and just said, hey, you know what? We'll figure out a way, and we'll just send out emails to people and see if they click on them. But certainly I should have thought of the fact that you could get the organization's blessing, and with their blessing, you could send out emails to anybody you want within the organization. And that's how KnowBe4 and the others were formed.
Yeah, and that was I think it was an important moment when the early teens, right, was into like really into the late teens, I would say, was the moment when cyber awareness became something that I think products like that, Scott, made it real for
Yeah, for sure.
enterprises to have like a cup or a bucket that they could put actual dollars in and budget that this thing is happening. Because
Yeah.
when it depends on people standing at the front of the class and giving training, that's sometimes difficult for an organization to sustain,
Yeah.
and operate if they don't already have a training culture, right? So I think it was a good first step. Of course, the other side of that is, it's great. You've made someone aware of one thing, and you've trained them in one thing, and you've measured one thing.
Exactly.
But it's not enough to actually stop attacks. It's not enough to actually change people's risk decision all on its own. There's been since then, right? There's been an evolution, and for a while we were seeing those phishing simulations paired up with video training.
Yeah.
And
They
which
call
is
it the teachable moment, which I have an opinion on.
yeah, well, we use the videos or the animations or whatever
Yeah.
because there's lots of things that you need to communicate to people that don't feed into a phishing email, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there's still limitations in that type of format, right? So
For sure.
we're continuing to move into the future, and I know what you've created is somewhat unique, and I think it's worth just pointing out the space you're in, right? Which
Yeah.
is it's applied learning, right? So do you want to classify the area you sit in the awareness field?
Yeah, we're actually in a really interesting space, because it's not just awareness. Awareness is typically used for compliance, and you say you got everybody to go through a course and now we're good, right? But you have no idea, as you said, you don't have any data to support whether people actually learned anything or whether they're any more resilient than they were before. And what you'll see in many security standards now is, the compliance is getting a little stricter, saying you should really do role-based training as well, right? And so people who have security responsibilities should also be trained. And that's not as scalable, because you can't just send one course to everybody. You've got to kind of decide how you're going to teach certain people about these things. And that's one of the things that we've done. We started out broad, and unfortunately there's so many people out there, it's hard to get traction. But one of the things that we're focusing on now, ClickArmor as an interactive gamified platform, is targeting the people who are most vulnerable and the most targeted, right? So when you get roles where, for example, a business SaaS application administrator, really, it's just a business manager who buys a license to, HubSpot or Salesforce, and they might be administering it. Now, maybe the IT team can take it over. and take some control. But in general, the people responsible for giving out privileges and roles don't know anything about security. So there's that, those growing gray areas and spaces where we need to teach non-technical people more about security for their own roles. And that's kind of where we've started to focus now.
Yeah, and I know there's there's different ways of looking at that, niching down the training, but the way I look at it is from this perspective of an educational outcome, right? Careful with
Absolutely.
that word because I want to differentiate education from awareness from training, but and I think that we use this word cyber awareness training, and it's like a catch-all. Organizations sign up for cyber awareness training and they think they're good, and then I come through and we do assessments at Fort Mesa, so we assess organizations capabilities in that space.
Yep.
And as well as the individuals in those organizations, where they actually at. And as we go through those assessments, we find, oh yeah, you own Bullfish, or you own KnowBe4, or whatever you think you're doing for awareness. But when we actually investigate, we find you're not doing nearly as good as you think you're doing. And one of those areas that almost every organization I go into falls down is what you're talking about, that role-based training. The idea that different people need to be trained differently. It's not just different people, though. It's also different organizations.
Yeah. Different industries, different departments.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's a really important moment in putting together that type of program. It's not like installing an EDR where you have to tailor. Someone has to be there to design the curriculum and make sure that the right people are learning the right things so that the correct outcomes happen. And when we go through an assessment, when we go through a compliance exercise to understand how someone's doing, we're not just looking at, do you have cyber awareness training? Check, right? It's like a lot of points of, are you doing this? And are you doing this? And did you make sure you got that content area covered? And it's a lot more nuanced than it was not that many years ago, right?
Absolutely.
And in addition to the fact that I, as an assessor, am doing that, I know insurers are asking for that, right? Regulators are asking for that. So I guess I'm using the word awareness because it's sort of a catch-all term.
Yeah, it's understood.
But but it's that space has grown up, right? It's matured. It's got a whole bunch of.
There's a new term that's a lot of people are sort of cynically saying, well, we just changed the name of it. It's now called human risk management, right? There are purists in human risk management who would say that's not really true. Awareness training is part of a broader umbrella of human risk management as a discipline, call it, right? Where we're looking at what is it that makes humans vulnerable? What is it, how do we manage that rather than just the training content itself? And I understand that, but you're right. It is definitely evolving. There's a lot of different views on how it all works. And the way I'd like to really focus in on it is to say there's two aspects. There's the content that needs to be engaging enough that people pay attention to it and learn something so that they do become resilient and less risky or less vulnerable. But there's the delivery method, and how are we going to do that? And everybody now is saying, well, we're just doing adaptive AI-based learning paths, right? So everybody gets their own learning path and AI will take care of it all. Well, I'm all for using AI for the things that it can add a great value for, but I think there's a lot of risk in letting AI run the real-time part of the content delivery.
Well, I think we'll end up in the same place we ended up, where organizations dumped all their money into phishing simulations, right?
Yeah.
And didn't even teach people, hey, you need to have your machine patched, So I think that's going to keep moving. I want to dig here because I would love. So I want to talk to you about my understanding of human risk management and that space that's evolving, because I have heard that terminology.
Yeah.
I think the awareness space has sort of become a set of tools, and there's a set of jargon and concepts that have become normalized. And so we know how to talk about that stuff. Human risk is an area that is evolving still.
Right.
And it's not new. It's not new because if you rewind 20, 30, 40 years, people have been doing personality tests. They've been doing background tests. This stuff has been happening a long time, but largely it's been a lot of pseudoscience, right?
Yeah, for sure.
and the outcomes haven't been clear. But we are in a new world of big data and evidence-based decision making, and we have a lot of tools available. It's not as simple as throw it at AI and great,
For
someone.
sure.
But there are ways to leverage those new tools to really make theory
Yeah.
that's been around a long time actually work. One area I've seen that's really interesting, we have another partner in our marketplace, Uatest, and they're on the sort of the other side of the human risk equation, Scott.
Yep.
They don't do awareness. They're looking at is this person supposed to have privileges to that application?
Yep.
Did anyone approve access to that account?
Yep.
They're looking at the account assessments,
Yep.
but and so that's also a concept. This idea of identity governance has been around a while,
Yep.
but there's this intersection point where the space that you're in and the space that like access control lists exist in, there's this space in the middle,
Yep.
which is it's not the same thing as, but it's very close to where zero trust lives.
Yes. Yeah.
Where you can make decisions about granting someone access to an application on the basis of, well, when did that person get an approval?
Yeah.
How were they approved? Is this person in the case of what do we know about this person? Has this person been how are they doing on their training? How educated are they? Right?
Yeah.
How are they? What concepts have been introduced to them? What geolocation are they coming from? Have we checked the patch? Have we checked the patch hygiene on their machine?
Yes.
Right. And you can bring together all that information into one place.
Yep.
And you can make a decision mixing what we know about the human and what we know about the technical space and what they're supposed to be allowed to do, and observe the behavior in real time and make a risk decision. And that is it's a that's a very evolving space right now. And I would not say that we really as an industry have it figured out. But I'm curious, where do you see how would you define that human risk space? Where do you see the edges of that space? What's practically going to be available to us in the next couple years, and what's like way out there? Because I'm talking about way out there stuff right now.
Yeah, and it's a great question. The challenge, of course, is that it's pretty easy to see that risk is really different in every organization, and it's almost impossible to standardize actually what you actually mean by risk. When I talk about risk, I learned it 20 years ago that risk is really a combination of likelihood of a undesirable event happening and the impact of that, like the worst case impact of that event happening, right? And so that involves the value of the assets that you're trying to protect, and it involves how many safeguards and things you've got in place. And some of those safeguards are more reliable than others. The technology of the firewall, you know exactly what it's going to do most of the time, but you don't know what the humans are going to do. So it doesn't have as high assurance. And so you have to kind of factor that in when you're doing these risk things. And a lot of companies, for good reason, simplify risk and just say, well, we take this and this and this, combine them together, and that's our risk score. But it really doesn't necessarily mean anything to anybody else outside that organization. And that's okay, because you should be looking at what's relevant to your organization, right? It's the same thing with compliance frameworks. You just do a compliance framework and you pass it all. Does that mean you're as secure as the next company, even in your own industry? Probably not. There are definitely, exceptions, right, in many of the controls. And so I'm just saying that from a human risk management point of view, yes, it's good to look at that broader view than just have people been trained. And it's good to mix in the other elements, because risk is a contextual thing. It's what are the threats like? What are the assets, and what are the vulnerabilities around you? So from my point of view, we're trying to provide a more accurate and more dynamic view of the individual's vulnerability. And it isn't just sending somebody a phishing message, right? We put people through a gauntlet of virtual inbox phishing emails that may or may not be safe or suspicious. And people have to use what we've taught them to decide, is the sender safe, or is the link safe, or is the body content suspicious? The Nigerian prince scams and things like that. So I think what way I position ClickArmor is that we're part of that foundational training, just to give the assurance that the humans actually have some ability to know what to do to protect their assets. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just like thinking about what this is going to look like, 5 years from now, and I'm still not sure what's a year away and what's
Sure.
20 years away.
Well,
But I think
I can
we're
tell you
all
what
going to find out.
I
Yeah.
can tell you what I envision, and in terms of, there are lots of companies now that are in the cyber training space that are saying, we're using AI adaptive learning to give you a different path, and that is great, because everybody does kind of need different focus for what they're learning. But at the end of the line, it comes down to, how is that information conveyed to the user or the employee, and are they actually understanding it? Are they going to remember it? And so we're really at the delivery side of it. But in the future, I can see integrations between those powerful database-driven systems that have a lot of information, not only about the humans that have done training and understand how vulnerable they are, and whether or not they passed phishing tests, or whether or not the user behavior analytics say they're at risk, and then feed that almost in real time to ClickArmor, or a platform that has interactive, dynamic content delivery. So we can actually create something that is engaging with a real phishing environment that allows people to be exercised on the things that we know they're vulnerable on.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait. So you're saying that's like right. We can almost touch that.
It's imminent. Yes.
Yes, that's imminent. So, okay. So I mean, I think we could dig more into how you guys sit in the industry, but I'm really curious I think the discussion we had the other day was, how are you using, not how are we going to be using AI soon, right? How are we using it like right now?
Yeah.
And I think you and I had something in common, which was this vision that introducing AI into our workflow actually creates free space, right? It creates free space by in I don't remember the words you used, but you used we were talking about how it opens you up to be more human with the people you work with and with your customers.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think what we were talking about is called comparative advantage. It's a term in the AI space, where if you listen to Dario Amodei, who's the CEO of Anthropic, one of the big creators of Claude, he uses that term and describes the simple concept of everybody's job is a series of tasks, and some of those tasks AI will do a better job at accelerating than other parts. That's because sometimes we have to interact with the real world, and AI isn't ready to do that quite yet. Or maybe there are experimental things that the AI, you just can't. You have to wait for chemical reactions to happen or something before anything can be sped up or moved along. So when you look at your series of tasks in a job workflow, each task can be accelerated to a different degree by AI. And when you look at it, you can say, you know what? Coding is actually one of the biggest things we can accelerate. And so software engineers are not going to be doing as much coding. They're going to be more like architects or project management, just maybe doing multiple projects where they were only doing one right now. But when you look at how their roles are going to change, we can also do the same thing for security managers or MSPs and say, what parts of my day will be accelerated by AI in the future? And how do we get there, right? And so there will be what we call a range of things from a small bet to a big bet. A big bet means I'm going to invest a lot in customizing an AI model or a chatbot to do specific things to help me do that job better. Or it might be a small bet where I'll just use the chatbot, do a prompt every day on certain things, and it'll be very flexible. So it's not a big cost, not a big risk. But we can look at how we can actually improve people's lives that way in terms of what you're spending time on managing.
Well, so I've heard a lot over the last couple of years about those efficiency gains, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I haven't heard people talk about much is what's other than like there's this fear that we're all going to be replaced by AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
That our jobs are at risk, that we're not going to need to hire humans anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the other side, if we just look at where AI is right now and where it's likely to be in the next couple of years, which is not theoretical, I'm excited about AI theoretically creating value, but
Right.
where is it actually creating efficiencies today,
Yep.
right? That space I think is well known, but I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about what do we do with the time that frees up. And I think if you have a really big, I was talking with someone this morning, if you have a really big, he's talking about eating an elephant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he's just like little bits at a time and he's using AI and it's freeing him up, but it just means he can eat the elephant faster. Like his day's still just as hectic as before. But
Yes.
I think there's opportunities to actually get out ahead,
Mm-hmm.
and not have that giant pile in front
Yeah.
of you of monotony, right?
Yep. Yep.
And get to the point where your brain can open up, right? And you're not stuck in the details. And um, what does that allow, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that for me, my most creative moments are when I'm not working, right? Um, not that my brain's not working, right? But that I'm walking to or from work, right? All I'm doing is walking,
Yep.
which means that there's this space that's opened up in my head. I'm not like scrolling around in my email. I'm not like dialing through to CRM. I'm not having conversations like this with another person where I have to think about what I'm saying. I'm just like free flowing, right?
Yep.
Thought. And if there's more of that in our lives, like what does that enable? And I think that the one of the examples you brought up was your ability to have more meaningful conversations with the people you work with. I think your client relationships were the first thing you mentioned, but then also
Yeah.
the other people you work with, where you don't have to rush through the interactions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of having a 30-minute meeting, you could have a 60-minute meeting and like no
Yeah.
big deal. And that is really interesting to me, to
Yeah.
have that space back in my life, right?
Yeah, I think it's a conscious decision though you have to think about and make ahead of time and plan. It's like it's time management overall, right? But if you think about the spectrum of things that you could do, if certain parts of your job could be done 10 to 100 times faster than they are now, what would you do at that time? Would you do, as you said, more widgets, or would you make time to do something more strategic, or talk to people and get caught up on learning, right? So, I mean, a lot of us have to keep up on technology, and technology is continuing to advance. AI is continuing to advance faster than just about any other technology right now. And so I think it's worth dedicating some of that saved time to learn about what can be done better to bring more value to you and to your customers.
So I know that I've probably saved with AI not a huge amount of time in my week, but I've saved somewhere between 4 and 5 hours a week
Mm-hmm.
in time that I used to have to document strategies, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now I can really just thought stream it and
Mm-hmm.
hand off, hand off those thoughts that are
Yeah.
fully formed and documented to the people that I work with, and that's been a huge saver for me. And I'm looking at the other parts of my, if I just look at it from a week perspective, the other parts of my week, there are some other potential areas of gain there. I will say that it is not the little tiny AI features around the edges of all the pieces of software I use have not been saving my time.
Right, right.
They have been a humongous distraction.
Yeah.
Either because I'm like, no, get rid of that side panel.
Oh,
I
I
don't
know. Every
want
time. How
AI
do I get
right
rid of
now.
this?
or or because I actually decide I'm going to try out the feature and then find out it was a complete waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure that from a I'm in a product company. You're in a product company. We all
Yeah.
use technology products.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of us product vendors have put AI in our products, and it's not creating the value that we had hoped. Um,
Yeah.
but we're moving in the right direction. I feel good about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little story. So, one of my jobs for the last 5 years as CEO of ClickArmor has been primarily the content creator for much of our security and compliance training content. And for the heaviest course I remember creating was GDPR, and that one I actually did use Copilot or ChatGPT to just start out, make sure that my knowledge was complete, right? So what are the main learning objectives? And I'd say, yeah, I know that. Oh, I didn't know about this, right? So now I got to go in and add a few areas in a lesson for that kind of thing. But I've gotten from taking 3 to 4 days of just solid work drafting the primary content for a course that would ultimately get translated into our interactive format. It's all data driven, so it just gets dropped in from Word into different parts of our platform. But going from 3 days to do a foundational course to a half a day is
Mhm.
pretty transformative from my point of view. I did, and sometimes I love the whole space. I love the job, but parts of my job of just digging in and trying to create that piece of content and get creative. It's when you're trying to do a bunch of other things, especially, and most MSPs and IT managers are doing many different jobs, right? If you can have something that takes the worst part of your day and makes it faster, that's a win, right?
Yeah, I'm the holy grail for me. I'm in a software field. I mean, we have content we need to create, but not as heavily as your business. For us, it's the typical software engineering pathways, and I listen to or I see quotations from um, uh, you know we've got the CEO of Google and Microsoft on stage, trying to one up each other on who's got more AI in their overall code base, and they're talking about like
Trillions of parameters, and yeah.
30% of our code is AI, 40%, and I'm just like, no effing way. That is not true at all, because I'm using the same tools. I'm using the
Okay,
same
yeah.
tools, and I'm trying them out because I want that dream too. But the tools aren't that good right now.
Yeah.
They're just not. They're not that good. They're not that effective. They're useful. They do
Hmm.
create value, but the idea that you can even the idea that you can even take that those tools can be let loose to create 30% of your code base. We're just not there right now. And
Hmm.
um, but I can see it. I can see it because 2 years ago, these tools were totally useless,
Yeah.
and they were a waste of time. And today, they are creating value, and it's fractional value. And I can see a future where some of the problems that exist today that are stopping that value from getting delivered are solved. And it's actually, I've seen just over the last year and really over the last 6 months, the models that have been released over the last 6 months have the number of parameters has gone up, but more impressively, the context windows have opened up
Hmm.
to allow the AI tools to really understand the problem space that they are in,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Rather than being in a global knowledge space, to really understand what you're asking them to focus on. That's been an area that's allowed those tools to improve quickly. And in fact, I think actually the AI models themselves are capable of some pretty impressive feats right now.
Yep.
But what's not happening is the tool sets that wrap the AI to
Yeah.
enable people to create UXs, to analyze code bases, to write code. Those tools aren't there yet. And ironically, they're not even AI. They're just the skeleton or
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
the framing to the around the model. And so, but we've got at least a year to get those to catch up with where the AI models are at. So
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I mean, the AI is getting so smart; it's going to be hard. It's the bottleneck is not going to be the AI itself; it's going to be the wrappers, like you said, right? Really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I've the latest generation of code generation tools I have seen fail in some pretty comical ways. Um, but if you go into a chat box and you ask a coding question, you actually get really amazing results.
Yeah,
And but the problem, of course, is you can't use a chat box to maintain a software application.
that's true. Have you heard of
So
vibe coding?
uh,
Vibe coding.
I'm maybe not familiar with
It's
that
an
term.
approach that's used. I guess I'm on another podcast with my two co-hosts for the last 15 years. We just covered it in a podcast last week, but it's basically using an IDE or an interactive development environment to say what you'd like to do, and it would like in real time create the code for you.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah. And I've even experimented with
yeah,
that. And so, like I said, when I'm hanging out in like the Gemini Canvas like space, which is neat because it doesn't require an IDE, right?
hmm hmm
It generates code that is at a high enough quality that man, that could just go straight out to the world. But it's all these little self-contained pieces to really integrate in with a larger project.
yeah.
You would need a large context window, and the AI actually has a large enough context window, but the developer tools have a hard time figuring out what you're trying to point them at. And it's something that I'm sure is going to get worked out in the next year, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And so I'm listening to these CEOs talk about like, oh, we got 30% of our code base is already written by AI. And I'm like, what? No, that's not true. There's no way that's true. The tools don't work yet.
No, no.
So yeah. So and the AI, and the code's been created over like 30 years, right? So you're
Yeah.
telling me you rewrote a third of your or you rewrote all of your software in the last year? I'm not seeing it. But so I think we got a long road there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
But I think it's a business opportunity too, right? And maybe for people who are listening who are looking at, how can I expand or shift my business? If you have an interest in doing new cool stuff, there's a ton of opportunity in that specific space of building stuff with AI. And one of the things we're actually looking at is just creating chatbots that ask a few questions and spits out exactly as I said, a tailored course for a CFO in healthcare space, right? And creates 10 sample emails that are both safe and have some kind of phishing element to them. So you can create new products that nobody's ever thought of before.
Yeah, I also, and I know that this is probably slightly further away than what you're talking about, but I can also see the opportunity for chaos engines. If you're familiar with that concept in cybersecurity, the
I don't
idea
think of.
of
Yeah.
uh, in a large enterprise, you'll actually have people that are designated chaos agents, and their job is it's a little bit different than a pen test, right?
hmm
Their job is to be an insider and to go around the organization and break stuff,
Oh man,
right?
I hadn't
To,
heard of that, but it's
to
obvious.
simulate all sorts of failures, right?
Yeah.
And in the security world, in large enterprise, there's a structured methodology around that type of thing, and the idea is that you break. It's a bit methodical,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not random. The idea is that you're supposed to test everything.
Yeah. Like
You
the
test
mystery
every
shoppers, right?
you test every piece of infrastructure that can fail in every way possible, and you simulate every single failure. And what makes it different than a pen test is a bit of a race,
hmm
right? And there's different types of pen tests, but typically you're targeted at a flag and you're trying to capture the flag, right? And
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
talk about
But I mean, how do you deal with the critical business processes? Like, how do you, say, well, I'm testing your critical business process. I'll break it, and oh, by the way, it cost you $1 million to because
well, this is the reason why it becomes a whole job or an entire department because you're right, it's difficult to do it safely. but also do it effectively at the same time. Um, so, but I could see an opportunity for AI in the training space, right? Where we're talking about giving AI access to actually be able to interact with
Yeah.
tools, to be able to click things, right?
If
That
you
this
could,
could go way beyond sending a phishing email,
yeah.
right? You
Well, I
could
mean, the other way to look at it is you could model the entire enterprise based on past behaviors that you've been able to measure, right? And then you would intervene in that model rather than in the real enterprise and see what happens. But you have to have a really accurate model.
You could do that, but I could see things like and a like here's a simple example of I think something that could be next level, and I'm not talking about like way in the future. I'm talking about like really like just beyond that vision that you laid out that's maybe like eminent, right? Is well, what about the virtual agent that uh you know calls up IT and tries to get their password reset, right?
Yes, yeah.
What about the virtual agent that clicks on a link, right?
Hmm.
And tests the IT department's incident response, right? How do they respond to that incident, right?
Yep, yep.
And so there's all sorts of potential opportunities there that are not incredibly sophisticated things, right? They're basically at the level of AI fruit that we are ready to pick
Yeah,
right now,
yeah.
right? And I think that there's that'll be a really interesting space as we start seeing. And I think it's basically the space you exist in, right? Which is gamifying this whole thing, right? So you're going to have all sorts of opportunities that are um, we're right at the edge. It's scary, right, to say we're going to give like this access to this desktop computer to AI,
Yeah.
but Microsoft is right around the corner. It's in dev preview right now, right? They're right around the corner from giving it to every single user in your organization. In every organization, everyone's going to have this built in the
Yep,
same way we had AppleScript built into Macs 30 years ago,
yep,
right? We're going to
yep.
have AIs built into all of our desktops to do actual things. And so I think if anyone could do it safely, it's the security guys. But um,
We hope, yeah.
we hope. Um, so I don't know how you feel about like do you have it? Do you have any fear? Do you have any fear? Do you have the AI fear?
Well, I mean, overall, aside from the fact that we're getting close to a point where you can't believe anything unless you see it in person because of deep
And
fake videos and
maybe not
audio,
even then.
right? Maybe not then. Yeah. Um, what I love to just a little tip for people who are listening. I love, if you haven't heard it, the AI Fix podcast. It's by Graham Cluley, who you may know from Sophos, right? He's done these Smashing Security podcast for a long time, but he has a new one that he's been doing for about a year called the AI Fix, and I love it because it's little stories about things that are happening in AI, and they get into the what's happening with the models and some of the practical issues around it, but they do it in a really fun way, and I recommend that as a podcast.
Yeah, I've been staying away from the talking heads on AI and sticking to white papers and research papers
Mm-hmm.
because I like dense information. That's like the way I digest the world.
This is
Um,
actually the podcast. I learned some of the about some of those papers, right? So there's the AI benchmarks, the guardrails, responsible scaling policy that Claude has from Anthropic, things like that. You sort of learn about them and then you go research them. So
the most interesting things I've been looking at the last few months are people who are testing like honesty in the AI
oh
reasoning
yeah,
models,
yeah,
right? People that are testing, um, how well do the guardrails work, and when does the AI decide that it's going to overrule its own guardrail or its own
yeah,
rules
yeah.
to achieve an objective?
And is it going to slow itself down because it thinks we might actually intervene if we think it's getting out of control?
Well, no, I don't know if you're joking or not, but I've read that in some of the papers
Yep.
that it is trying to fool the people that are watching it.
Yep.
And you can even see the internal dialogue because the researchers are able to monitor things at a slightly lower level than what the AI typically presents to the user.
Yeah.
Um, So I mean, that's the sandbox escapes that I've been reading about are super scary right
Oh
now.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Did you hear the one? I think it was. It's been a while since I heard about it, but it was they were doing some kind of a test of virtualized system, right? And they were having the AI do some kind of penetration exercise, and the AI, when they started at one time, the AI realized that the actual system that it was supposed to be targeting wasn't running. So it actually hacked into the hypervisor, started the system, and then hacked the system.
yeah, yeah. I read that paper. I read an article about the paper, and then I went and read the paper. And it's even scarier when you read the paper than what people were discussing in the industry rags, because they really it was unanticipated, right? It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
unanticipated. That was the reason why. They did give the AI access to. I mean, there was a virtual lab, right? And they did give the AI access to the operating system, but yeah, there was unanticipated vectors there. And if you can't anticipate the vectors, how do you protect from them? I think there was this period back in the 70s and 80s when early cybersecurity, we didn't call it cybersecurity back then. It
That's
was
right. IT
it
security.
was yeah, or information
Yeah.
security. And there was this thinking at the time that if we just planned out the system design effectively enough, we could think of every possible there's a way to break it, and then we could design the castle around that, and then the system will be provably secure, right? That was a big concept in government security, mainframe security.
Yep.
And we still have laws built around that and government regulations about that, around building our systems for the government. And it
Mm-hmm.
turned out to be complete hogwash. Like, all of those theories about we can plan for it, we can analyze it, they even had mathematical proofs, and it turned out to be nothing but smoke and mirrors, because these systems are all broken. They're still
Well,
they all got
AI just
broken.
inherently AI just is not provable. You don't know
Yeah.
what what's actually doing.
So, well, but here's the issue: is where we got these models and we're creating sandboxes around them, but we don't really know how to contain these things.
Yeah, there's something
So,
called deterministic. Shoot, can't remember the last word of it, but it's around trying to prove or understand how the AI got its deterministic interpretability. I think it's called. So it's a fun area to look at to say, how are we going to prove whether or not the AI knew what it was doing when it gave us this information?
well, before we run out of time here, I want to just go back to Click Armor.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what's available today? What's going to be available soon? Why should people reach out to you? And what should they do next if they really feel like they need to level up here?
Yeah. So right now you can get any number of foundational courses that are interactive, gamified, and designed to be engaging for people so that they actually learn about phishing, social engineering, insider threats, passwords, you name it. But the magic of ClickArmor is it's very scalable and flexible. So rather than it all being video based, which takes a lot of time and money to make changes to or create something new, we can actually turn changes and new course content around very quickly. So that's why I'm really keen on what will be coming in the future is those role-based training and assessment areas. So imagine being able to do a phishing assessment for that CFO in healthcare with 10 or 20 different emails that he can assess within a few minutes, and you'll have a much clearer view of what their proficiency is in being able to spot threats, not just phishing, but social engineering as well. So those are the things I'm excited about, and I am trying to use AI wherever it makes sense to accelerate the creation of that content, because the creation of content and those assessments is kind of the bottleneck for a lot of people. So looking forward to doing that. And something else I'd just like to mention is if you're interested at all in cybersecurity awareness, human risk management, or whatever you call it, I run a monthly session called the Cybersecurity Awareness Forum, sponsored by ClickArmor, and it's really independent of ClickArmor in a way, because we invite CISOs, MSPs, IT security managers, you name it, and we get 20 to 30. Actually, last time we did one on AI powered cyber attacks on employees, we had over 40 people on the live session, all in the chat. It was really fun and educational. So if you go to the clickarmor.ca website, you'll see a little flyout that lets you join the Cybersecurity Awareness Forum and get notifications on our next session. We post all of the session recordings on our community and on YouTube. So happy to have anybody who wants to join us. Everybody's welcome, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Scott, for joining us here today. And I can't wait to have you back. I don't know. Maybe we're actually going to be able to see. We're going to be able to see some of this imaginary imminent AI future in our next conversation.
Let's hope so.
But
Yeah.
it's really not that imaginary, right? It really is.
No,
Like
it's very doable.
here.
I mean, we have an
Yeah.
API that can, really link to just about any standard learning management system. And if that learning management system has the data about who's vulnerable and any other metrics you want to drive the kind of content people need to be trained on, then we'll be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, until then, thanks for joining.
Thanks
For
very
everyone
much.
else, Scott, clickarmor.ca. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Clickarmor.ca, and of course, fortmesa.com. Like, share, and subscribe, guys, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks.